my mother had a heart problem and died at age 37. So my sister and I and my brother, we had to deal with that. So that's one of the strains in the book, the health problems that my mother faced and the effects it had on our family. So I say that as I introduce this page-and-a-half introduction to the book. The fragility of my mother's health was one of the central themes of my upbringing. Another was the paucity of verbal communication in our household, especially on the part of my father and grandfather. Each man's demeanor was serious, his sense of discipline strict. Only our mother and our baby brother softened the somber atmosphere of our home. Mary McGrory, the longtime political columnist for the Washington Post, once described me in print as funereal. And that description didn't please me, but I knew it to be true. That was my look all right. When I gazed into the mirror, I saw the stern faces of my father and grandfather staring back. My early childhood had been happy. I'd found joy in the narrow world filled with family, sports, and the Roman Catholic Church. But adolescence and my mother's illness changed my visage. I learned my father's and grandfather's lessons well. The tragedy of my mother's early death notwithstanding, I was able to scale, sometimes just barely, the heights necessary to advance in life and end up with a long career in government service. I reached the highest levels of leadership in our federal government. I sat and spoke with presidents of the United States, heads of states of governments from around the world, fellow congressional leaders, and thousands of my Michigan constituents. We discussed the most significant issues facing our communities, our nations, and our world. And through it all, I pushed myself never to forget that I was an East Side kid, the son of Detroit's working class, who grew up loving underdogs. If I tried to do anything during my years in government, it was fight for those underdogs. What I accomplished in Congress was and is important. Recalling my achievements there is important too, and will fill a second volume. But understanding and remembering what came before, the people, the places, and events that shaped me, the maze that I had to navigate to get to Washington, is no less significant. I've reached a point in my life at which I've decided to take stock, and in reviewing my history, some memories have come easily, some through the aids of friends and family members interviewed for this project, and some barely at all. Unearthing the happy memories as well as the painful ones has helped me to better understand my failures as well as my successes. In going back through my early life, trying my best to figure out what I was thinking at any given moment in time and why. Elbowing my way into memory, in the words of the Israeli writer Fania San Salisbury, has presented its own rewards, although not without discomfort. Fortunately, the satisfaction has far outweighed the discomfort. So here is the story of my youth. It starts with my grandparents and my parents, with large and small towns in Ukraine and Poland, and with an American town where I took my first step, said my first word, and learned the fundamental life lessons that made me the legislator I was and the person I will always be. I started the book with my grandparents because for years I tried to get my parents and grandparents to tell me the story of my background, to learn about really where we all came from, and I could never get it done. My Polish grandparents only spoke Polish. They came here at young ages but lived into their 70s, never spoke English. And my Ukrainian grandfather spoke a little bit of English but not very much, and their answer to my questions through my father were, that's the past. We don't want to talk about the past. We want to think about the future. And that's a very common retort, I think, you will find from relatives. And so leaving your home is difficult. The editor of the book section of the Washington Post, your writer/editor, by the name of Charles, said something I read recently that stuck with me, and it was basically that every act of immigration is an act of betrayal. And he meant by that when you're leaving a place or a country, you're leaving people that you know and you love, you're leaving the only home you ever knew, and it's not easy to do. So anyway, several editors told me not to put this in the book, but I said, the hell with it, I'm going to tell the story, because I wanted to tell the story of my grandparents and my parents. The book is also for my grandchildren and for my great-grandchildren. I want them to know where they came from. I don't believe you can get to go where you want to go unless you know where you've been and where your predecessors have been. And so that's why, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book. The other was just, it's a coming-of-age book. It's just about me growing up in this little Polish community within the city of Detroit called Hamtramck, Michigan. How many of you ever heard of Hamtramck? A few people here. Dobrze.
We've all.
It's a great community, and I have very fond memories. This is where I learned my values, my experiences. It's where I developed attitudes, and where I got my cushion to have a public life later on.